Good morning. You're listening to your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. I am attorney Wade Skalsky, and you're about to experience Wade Beyond the Courtroom.
Ooh.
I know, right? That was pretty serious.
Wait.
I know. On the board with me today is Mike. Mike, how are you?
I am well, sir. How are you?
Again, we are wearing almost the same shirt. So, gray polo, radio gold descriptions.
I think I bought this at Costco like years ago.
We may have got it at the same time. I don't know. This might be a Target shirt. For me personally, I don't know. But as always, radio gold describing what we're wearing. So how are you doing today?
I am well, thank you.
I'm surprised that you're in the studio. I was going to think that you were going to be running the Santa Clarita Marathon today.
You know, it was funny because I went for dinner last night in the mall at a restaurant with meatballs bigger than your head.
Okay.
You know which one it is.
All right.
And there were literally 50 porta potties. I'm like, it's got to be the marathon.
Something's happening.
Yeah.
Were there other marathoners in there carb loading for the race today?
Oh, no, I don't know.
Oh, okay. So you were at an Italian restaurant, I'm assuming, right?
I was, yeah.
All right. And were there a lot of people there that looked very nervous about tomorrow?
The restaurant was, I understand earlier, was really full. Whether those were patrons or race enthusiasts, I don't know.
Unknown.
But I think they're prepared.
Mike, when you're out in the field, I need you to have your Wade
running?
Beyond the Court, because I have the show to do today.
That's true.
Yes.
You do it by yourself. You cell phone.
That's true. I could do it from the
technology exists.
It's true. We could do a remote, as they say in the business.
Probably never been done, actually. Actually, doing the radio show while you're running.
Well, next year, this is going to happen. Next year, I promise you that I will do a remote from perhaps watching the marathon.
Well, do you run?
I have been known to walk fast.
I don't mean to the courtroom.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have been known to walk fast on occasion, yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes. So what we're going to be talking about today is a couple different things. We're going to be talking about the decreasing trend of lawyers enrolling in law school. We're going to be talking about jury trials, and we're going to be third talking about Donald Trump on SNL. So did you see Donald Trump on SNL?
I watched bits and pieces. I kept fading in and out. 11:30's late.
So he was on Donald.
He was on,
right?
yeah.
Okay, the world didn't shut down.
No.
We still, certain states did not secede from the union.
The show did start 5 minutes late.
Oh.
There was a slide with a hashtag on the bottom, but and it just kind of started abruptly.
See,
there was a problem.
We've never started late here in Wade Beyond the Courtroom.
And there was an organization that was offering to pay people $5,000 if they would yell out racist during the show.
Did anybody do that?
Yeah, Larry David.
Oh, really? Oh, that's funny.
So it was good.
Well, the funny thing is that, we always talk about the First Amendment here in Wade Beyond the Courtroom, and that's, very important. Like, agree or disagree with Donald Trump in terms of his policies, his whatever you think. He has to have the ability to say whatever he wants because we actually live in a free country where we don't shout down the opposition or try not to.
And he's got the money.
He does.
As well. So
yes.
That's,
Yes. So let's talk a little bit about, so did you know that there's this trend now that law school admissions are decreasing, meaning less people are going to law school?
I did not know, but let me guess, because of online stuff, maybe?
Well, I think it's that a couple things. I think that the cost of law school, number one, is so expensive. And number two is that for, many years, I think there was a sort of a glut of law schools, meaning...
So like Pepperdine, USC, UCLA...
Everybody's class sizes are decreasing a few. Like, I'll give you some examples. So, if you look at, there's schools that are going from, like, DePaul University dropped from 156 students to 148 students. The John Marshall Law School fell from 151 to 146, and Northern Illinois University decreased from 150 to 146. Now, people
are those big numbers, though?
That's part of my point. Is like, you may not think that's a big number, but each one of those students pays $40,000 in tuition for 3 years.
Wow.
So that's $120,000 per student. So if you have, for an example, DePaul went from 156 to 148. Well, that's 8 people. That's almost $1 million in tuition over 3 years.
So that is a lot.
Yeah. And so the way that the law schools are kind of trying to fix this is they're actually lowering their admission standards, meaning they're admitting people who they would put at risk for their ability to pass the bar. So there's kind of this debate going on if they should do that or not, because obviously we want qualified people in the legal field, right?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we don't obviously want people who can't pass the bar, because then what happens is, what if you go to law school, you have $200,000 in debt, and you can't pass the bar, which means you can never work as a lawyer, which means how are you going to pay off that debt?
So there's some investment concerns from the schools as
well, there's concerns because they don't want to be admitting students that can't pass the bar. And so, because look, if student loan debt, you cannot get rid of that in bankruptcy.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is you have that stuff forever. And so there's this big debate going on right now in the academic field is, should they keep trying to fill those seats if the demand is going down by letting people who are less qualified in? You have this, a corollary is like, so for instance, like a long time, LAPD had a really hard time of getting people to come be officers because the pay and all that. So they started to accept less qualified candidates, and from a lot of those less qualified candidates, they had a lot of issues with regards to policing because you don't want to, you want to take people who can do the job, and it's sort of a position of trust, right? So you don't want to take like just anybody that can do that job because they hold a lot of power. The same is true with a lawyer. I mean, if you go, no one's ever asked me how many times I took the bar once. No one's ever asked me what law school I went to, George Washington University. But so people assume that you have a certain level of competence when you're in the legal field. And I just think it's interesting that I think some of these law schools are looking more at the monetary side than they're looking at, okay, should we be putting out good lawyers? Are we a business or are we a school?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
and
totally.
it's interesting because it's going into law school is always sort of like what smart people that didn't know what they were going to do job was. You know what I mean? Like if they were like, people know, like you've met your friend who's like, I want to be a doctor. So they grow up and they go be a doctor, right? But a lot of lawyers, a lot of people that I meet that are attorneys and I went to law school with, I would say half of them is like, well, I didn't know what else to do, so the law seemed like a good profession. Yeah. And so, I think it's interesting though that may be declining now. So maybe it's a millennial thing.
Well, and there are law schools and there are law schools.
Right, exactly. But they all cost kind of the same. That's what it's. You can go to Harvard. Harvard's like whatever it is, 40 or 50 grand a year, whatever. But then you can also go to like a school that's barely accredited. It's also 40 grand. Yeah. So again, it's critical which school you go to. Obviously, if you're going to go to like a big firm job, you got to go to Harvard. But just to go out and hang your own shingle and start your own law firm, it doesn't really matter where your license is from as long as you have a license.
Better call Saul.
I know, right? So we're going to unpack a little bit more issues, talk some more about the mechanics of a jury trial when we get back from the break. You're listening to your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Welcome back. You're listening to your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. I am attorney Wade Skalsky, and this is Wade Beyond the Courtroom. So we're talking a little bit about law school admission, and obviously, look, when people go into law school, they want to become lawyers, and because I think when you're a kid, you watch things like Perry Mason, and you watch things like you read To Kill a Mockingbird, and all these lawyers and literature and TV. And that seems like a fun. Why? Because you see them doing jury trials, right? Would you ever want to do a jury trial, Mike? Not be in one.
As an attorney?
Yeah. Would you ever think? Do you think that would be fun? Would that appeal to you? No. Well, I think it's one of those things where it's public speaking, and public speaking is kind of ranked as a top feeling of top fear for everyone.
It's a lot of responsibility.
It is, well, that too, yeah. So, and anyway, so I've done a few jury trials in my time, north of 40 or 50, and during that time, there's this. A lot of people they always ask you about what's the the number one thing that makes you nervous about a jury trial or whatever, or what's the sort of the process that is the most complicated. And I always think picking the jury is always one of the most complicated things because it's an art, not a science, right? Because you literally, depending on what side you're on, every side has, something they're trying to accomplish. So if you're a prosecutor, you're trying to, get a guilty conviction. If you're a defense attorney, you're trying to get an acquittal, right? And so the people that decide, though, what's going to happen is not the judge, it's a jury. And so you have to pick that jury trial. So have you ever, go ahead.
I've been in voir dire twice.
Okay.
And it didn't get picked. Mm-hmm. The first case was a case of a fireman who was, I guess, charged with breaking into businesses that had fires and stealing their furniture that was salvageable. Obviously, that's a theft case.
Right.
The second one was I was juror number 7 on that one. I got dismissed on that. The second one was a case where it was a grand theft case, and the guy was still in custody, and I got dismissed on that too. Whether it's my radio affiliation, which could be, I mean that's possible, but I didn't. Both times I got dismissed. But the process is fascinating, and
I want to talk about this fireman that would break in and allegedly get. Did he like the smell of burnt furniture?
I don't know.
Is that what it was?
I don't know.
A burnt furniture thing that he enjoyed.
But the long and short was I was at a function later that year, and it was a holiday party, and the prosecutor was actually at this function, this party. And I said, well, what was the outcome? He goes, oh, you mean the fireman? I said, he was guilty. He says, no, it was a 3-week trial. So not 3 weeks for a trial. Usually most jury do, as you know, it's usually 2 or 3 days and it's done.
Yeah.
But to go 3 weeks.
That's a long trial.
Yeah.
He must have stolen a lot of furniture.
Something. Yeah. Opened his own furniture store somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
He just like burnt furniture.
But it's what's fascinating is the questions they ask and the parables. And I won't waste a lot of time, but. We're talking about reasonable doubt and all that. How would you know that, and what does that mean? And the attorney painted a picture of let's say, for example, my son likes to draw, and I come in the room and I see a box of crayons and I see crayons on the wall. Reasonable doubt is that he did it, and that was kind of like what the example he used.
Well, the reason was it the defense attorney that did that,
Yeah.
or the reason why that they do that is because you're trying to sort of uncover. Jurors that are good for you,
right.
But also it's the reverse. You're trying to uncover jurors that are bad for you, but you also, if you have an idea that you think a juror is good for you, you don't want to let the other side know that you think that juror is good for you.
Right.
Because you get something called peremptory challenges, which means that you just get to strike people automatically. You get a certain number of them depending on, what kind of case you're in and which jurisdiction. But basically it's like you don't have to give a reason. You say, okay, we're going to kick that guy off the jury, right? Like you got kicked off the jury by somebody who didn't like you for their case,
whatever,
right?
Yeah.
Somebody probably really liked you. And
Twice.
Yeah, somebody probably really liked you and somebody probably didn't, right?
And the judge tells you, says, if that happens, don't take it personally.
It's not.
Just stand up and walk away.
Yeah. It's just because, it's an art, not a science. And so when you're asking those questions, you're trying to figure out, okay, and it's a weird thing to say, but you have to stereotype people. Like you have to say, if you have a, like an older gentleman who's got a frown on his face, and seems grumpy and crabby, then you're like, is that guy, you have to ask yourself, is he grumpy and crabby because he's here and he's going to punish the defendant because he's here? Or is he going to punish the prosecutor because he's here?
We had one woman was on voir dire, the attorney asked her, he goes, hey, or the judge asked her, how would you know that the defendant was guilty? And she said, I'd feel it in my bones.
Right.
So obviously,
right. Yeah, no,
so long.
She's not willing to give it a fair shake, right? And you can't, and it's interesting because you can't discriminate on race, right?
No.
Or you can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. So people are in this weird thing where they're, and I'm not suggesting that you should do that in any way, shape, or form. But what I'm saying is that, so when I say stereotype people, I say you have to kind of try to look at them as, there's a famous, did you ever see The Devil's Advocate, the movie The Devil's Advocate?
I think so.
Keanu Reeves plays like a super lawyer, right?
Okay.
And so they actually have this part about, they go through voir dire, and he talks about how he knew that the guy makes his own clothes, right? And so first of all, how would you know if someone makes his own clothes? I have no idea. But his whole thing was, well, if the man makes his own clothes, then he's an excellent juror for us, whatever. And so you can think yourself into a box with those types of things. You can really kind of try to outsmart yourself a lot of things.
I remember the prosecution asking questions like, or actually the defense attorney asking questions like, do you have any members of law enforcement in your family? Have you ever been a victim of a violent crime, or know anybody that's been a victim of a violent crime? And I remember there was one juror that said, I don't like police.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, this is obviously to—these are things you want to establish early on, obviously.
Absolutely. And the funny, not the funny thing, but I like it when jurors say that. What scares, because then I know, I'm like, okay, we're dealing with here. What frightens me as an attorney is when they don't say anything.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you're sitting there and you're trying to figure out, because the judge has a bunch of pre-made questions that they'll ask, like you said.
Sure.
Exactly. And you'll have a juror who will not have to elaborate on anything. They're like, no, and you can't learn anything about them, because even you could learn a lot about people by how they answered the most simplest of questions, right? And so just by their demeanor, just by how they do it. But if you're getting no, and that's all you're getting, the person's a total unknown, then in voir dire, you're actually allowed to ask your own set of questions.
Sure.
And so, when you do that, when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about some of the sample questions that you may hear in a jury voir dire. Thank you so much. You are listening to your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Welcome back. You are listening to your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. I am attorney Wade Skalsky, and this is Wade Beyond the Courtroom. Today we're talking a little bit about jury trials and voir dire. Your friend voir dire. We always have a lot of friends in the legal system.
What does that word mean?
Voir dire.
Voir dire.
It's French. I know that, and I think it means to ask questions. So I don't know. I should know what that means, or maybe it's Latin. Actually, it's probably Latin.
Probably, yeah.
I don't know. I think it just means ask a lot of questions that you're hoping for. Illuminating answers from.
Yes.
So, really quick, before we talk more about your friend voir dire, I want to talk about Christmas creep. Do you know what that is?
Kind of, sort of.
It's when Christmas commercials start earlier every
Before
single
Halloween.
year. Yeah, exactly. Well, I think November 1st. Like I think November 1st, all of a sudden everything was Christmas, and then I always tell from your local coffee place, wherever you get coffee from, if you have a Starbucks coffee there, what is your coffee drink of choice?
This is the non-fat gingerbread latte.
Oh, outstanding! Yes, shaken, not stirred.
I would hope so.
Right. So, so Christmas creep. So, and it drives me crazy because it immediately gives me a panic about I haven't bought my Christmas presents. So, Mike, I absolve you of getting me a Christmas present.
Thank you.
Yes, you don't have to. Just your presents will be enough for us. But anyway, so let's talk about voir dire a little bit. So, beyond Christmas creep, you got plenty of time. It's not even Thanksgiving yet. Christmas is still over a month away. So don't keep listening to the show. Don't run out and try to go buy some presents.
Relief.
So, some of the questions that you can ask are like catch-all questions. Like you want someone to sort of reveal themselves, right? You don't ask them something specific. So one of my favorite ones is there anything, because the way that voir dire works is that the judge asks a bunch of questions, and then you write down on your legal pad, your opinion of jurors or whatever, and then some attorneys will ask questions of everybody, right? They'll say, okay, so raise your hand if this. That kind of stuff drives me crazy because it takes forever, and I actually like to do voir dire really fast. Because it just drives me crazy. Like you'll get like a 26-year-old prosecutor who's really into it, and I'm really into it too. But I kind of done it a few times, so I can kind of get to where I need to go quickly. And they'll ask everyone, but asking everyone is actually bad in my opinion because like during the judge's voir dire, you'll identify people who you're like, this person is good for me. Right?
Yeah.
So actually, I don't want to ask that. I don't want that person talking anymore because the more that person talks, the more likely it is that the prosecutor is going to either A, notice that person's good for me, so they'll use one of their peremptory challenges on them, or B, what will happen is they'll actually say something dumb like I hate everyone or something, and then you'll be able to get them struck for cause. And so what that means is that so you only have so many peremptory challenges, right? And you don't want to use them because you want to save them, as much as possible. So you try to get jurors struck for what's called struck for cause. And what you basically do is you argue to the judge that the juror should be disqualified for some reason, like they can't be fair or they're prejudiced against one side or the other, right? And it's a weird argument to make. You don't do it in the juror's presence. But so if you're asking a bunch of general questions to the jury, then some of your good jurors might disqualify themselves by saying something dumb.
Well, I saw a judge actually question why he dismissed a juror. What was wrong with this person?
Well, sometimes you have to, if you're challenged on, you can't dismiss someone for a discriminatory reason.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, like, let's say that you have a defendant of a certain race, right?
Yeah.
The prosecutor, and this comes up more as a prosecutor, the prosecutor can't dismiss people of the same race because they think they're going to be sympathetic, right? Because that's discriminatory. Now they can dismiss them for all sorts of other reasons or whatever, but you can actually get into a big to-do, as they say, about if they do that. So, for instance, if the prosecutor has 5 strikes or whatever, and everyone they strike is Asian, for example, right? But so there are no more Asian people on the juror. A defense attorney can be like, hey, you can challenge that. You can be like, why did you strike everybody that was of the same race as the defendant, let's say, because you can't stereotype people in that way. It's an interesting thing. Like I'm not suggesting that you should, but you have to stereotype people in some way in terms of you have to figure out with very limited information if they're good or if they're bad for you, and that's what the voir dire process is for with the questions. So, but you can't do it like on based on race, basically. You also can't do it based on gender too. So, like if you dismiss all of the ladies on the or all the men for one reason or whatever, you have to have good reasons to do that are separate from gender. So when I ask voir dire or I do voir dire, I like to do I like to actually pick people who are bad for me, right? Like I say, okay, I either think this person is neutral or good for me, so I stay away from those people because I don't want to give the prosecution a reason to get rid of those people, right? So they don't have to use one of the peremptory challenges. So but people that are bad for me, like if there's a former policeman that's on the jury, typically those guys are pro-prosecution, pro-police, because they're former policemen. That's not their fault. Like, I don't begrudge them that, right? Yeah. So, or if you had a former prosecutor on the stand, right? So you would talk to that person, because you would want to try to have them, could you really be fair? Or is there anything that you want to, talk to us about? Things like that. So, anyway, so all these things are parts of jury trials are really.
We'll revisit this again. It's a good topic.
There's a lot to talk about with regards to voir dire, but I had a fun time talking to you today, Mike. I'm glad you didn't run the marathon. Me too.
So happy Sunday.
Well, you're listening to your hometown station, AM 1220, KHTS. I'm attorney Wade Skalsky, and you've just experienced Wade Beyond the Courtroom.